Mark Rogers TV going to the Big 12 to talk up the Baylor Bears with a game this week, a meaningful game as they dive into conference play against Oklahoma State. We bring in Sean Cordy from Today's U to set the stage. Sean, it's been a while. How you been?
Yeah, it's been a while, but it's been going good, Mark. Thanks.
So let's look at Baylor, and we'd be remiss not to address, to a certain extent, the off-field situation, many issues regarding Art Briles' dismissal and so forth. So the latest occurrence was the comments by interim coach Jim Grobe about Sean Oakman entering the locker room after the game, and he said in the post-game after the Rice game that he wouldn't recognize Sean Oakman. A lot of people in the locker room after a game like that and didn't recognize Sean Oakman, wouldn't know him, and therefore kind of dismissed it from there. But you attended Grobe's news conference this week. What did he have to say in terms of a follow-up?
Yeah, so Grobe came in on Wednesday to address the media, specifically saying that some outlets put words in his mouth saying that he actually didn't know him. They implied like he was ignorant to the situation, but of course he does know of what Sean Oakman did and who he was, but because he wasn't a coach for him, he wouldn't have been able to pick him out from a crowd, especially if he was in a locker room with players looking pretty similar to him. I mean, you got a lot of tall, big dudes, and Sean Oakman wouldn't stand out to him as someone that shouldn't be there. But with that being said, he said that if he knew the situation, it wouldn't be something he would have allowed. But the media blew this into something that really tried to put a bad look for Baylor once again and try to put that to rest.
Okay, I'm going to play squarely on the fence on this one because I can understand what Grobe meant. That's how I took it as well. I took it as exactly the way he intended it. That's how I understood it. Then I started to hear a ton of criticism. Maybe he should have been out in front of the situation, hindsight's 2020, to prevent it before it would ever happen and put those boundaries in place to prevent it. But in regards to him identifying Sean Oakman as a person, that's understandable. He's never played for him. He doesn't know him. He's never talked to the man. All right, very good. So we've got a big game against Oklahoma State coming to Waco this week. Of course, the Cowboys, the victims of the last second Hail Mary and the hook and ladder and the blown call by the refs. The Baylor offense, I saw the Rice game, maybe not clicking on all cylinders. Seth Russell back at it. Seems to be throwing the ball okay, but maybe the playmakers not quite as dynamic as they have been in the past.
Yeah, and Grove kind of addressed that too. He said that with Seth Russell being out with the injury last year, it just may have taken these first 3 games to try to really get into the rhythm that he was last year when he was leading the nation in touchdowns and yards per attempt. And this year, Russell so far has kind of dialed it back. He's only averaging about 7 yards per attempt. He's second in the conference right now behind Pat Mahomes with 9 touchdowns, but that's not the numbers that Baylor's typically used to getting from him. So that's going to be really vital for Russell to show that he can revive that kind of statistic that he was putting together against Oklahoma State. OSU has been kind of leaky against the passing game so far on defense. So it's going to be really interesting to see KD Cannon try to fill in that role that Corey Coleman had last year with so much success against Oklahoma State. So, and Cannon said he feels like he has an extra amount of pressure to do that. Talked about that. And Cannon had a pretty great night against Rice. Of course, that was against the first 3 games have been pretty bad opponents so far. So to do this against a fringe top 25 team should really put the Bears on top of the conference.
Shaq Linwood, of course, he's been a little banged up early in the season and not exactly running the football with the authority or with a burst that he has in the past.
Yeah, and a lot of that I would credit to an inexperienced offensive line. Linwood's getting the first carries. He's getting to go against the fresh defense, and the offensive line just isn't holding up the way it usually does for him. So he's not able to get through the holes like he usually does. But luckily, he does have JaMychal Hasty and Terrence Williams behind him. They're all splitting carries pretty well evenly. And Hasty, the freshman, has been absolutely electrifying so far, averaging just under 9 yards a carry, has 2 touchdowns on the season. So keeping those 3 running backs rotating equally will be what Grove has said will be a vital part for this game.
So looking at the Baylor defense set up against Oklahoma State, the Cowboys coming off an impressive win over Pitt, a team that had defeated Penn State the week before, and the Panthers are a pretty good football team. Oklahoma State was able to defeat them, I think, 34-27. Mason Rudolph exploded, a couple touchdown passes, 540 yards in that game. To put things in perspective, Pitt did give up a ton of yardage and points to Trace McSorley, a new starting quarterback at Penn State the week before, so the Panthers might have some issues in the secondary. But at the same time, Oklahoma State obviously presents issues in the passing game.
Of course, Mason Rudolph has been really great so far, although if you ask Cowboys fans, are really, really picky that he overthrows a lot of balls. If you'll see him going deep to James Washington, he'll probably get maybe 1 out of 2 attempts to him. Those passes last week, and if it weren't for the rain delay, that success might have continued, and Washington could have easily gone over 350 yards in that game. But he's averaging over 20 yards of reception right now. He's a great deep threat, and he's not the only one. Jawad Seals has impressed. He had that 86-yard reception to put the Cowboys on top last week. So it's going to be really vital that Baylor controls that, especially with Oklahoma State's run game kind of in question. It bounced up last week with Rennie Childs, but it's still not 100%. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Baylor reacts against a team that kind of mirrors Baylor's offense in a way, at least vertically, that can push the ball downfield quickly. And Baylor's turn to a 3-4 defense has been vital to their success so far.
Sean, the stats aren't horrible for Chris Callahan. He's missed an extra point, though. He has missed a couple field goals. Are you pretty confident that he could kick in the clutch?
I mean, except for that 61-58 field goal he had 2 years ago as a freshman, he hasn't shown that he's consistent in the clutch right now. I mean, you go back, he missed 2 field goals last week. And you ask Baylor fans, he's a 1 in 2 chance kind of guy.
Right, Sean. Oklahoma, obviously preseason was the pick in the Big 12 and to carry the college football playoff banner. They lose 2 non-conference games. Texas would be the next team that was designated to a certain extent before losing to Cal. That's a bad out-of-conference loss. So the way it sets up basically is all the good teams or projected good teams in the Big 12 have a non-conference loss or 2. Besides Baylor, but Baylor is going to get take a hit for not scheduling in the out-of-conference. But this is an undefeated football team that has a chance, of course, starting Big 12 play on Saturday to run the table. So seems to be the best hope for the conference.
And that seems really odd to say because heading into the season, everyone was down on Baylor. But I look at it similar to last season when people were really high on Baylor and low on Oklahoma, and Oklahoma came out and won the conference. If I remember right, they were your under-the-radar pick to win, and you did pick them. Baylor could be in the same situation this year. Of course, the non-conference hurts them, like you said. And even more on top of that, you have the whole situation with Bryles and the sexual assault situation that kind of puts a negative picture for most of the nation. If Baylor does win the conference and they're making a case for the 4th spot or even higher, you're going to get a lot of outrage, I think, to see how the committee handles that.
Well, Sean, for the record, I picked Oklahoma again this year in the Big 12, but I also picked them to lose out of conference games, 2 of them, which they have to date. So I left the Big 12 out of the playoff this year, and I went Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and Washington is my off-the-radar pick. Did you have a selection for the college football playoff this year?
I don't want to go and say I did because of hindsight. I probably would have been wrong going back and recalling what I would have said. But I would say I was on the bandwagon for Oklahoma, so I was wrong on that front.
All right, Sean Cordy from Today's You helping us set up Oklahoma State Baylor, one of the huge games in the Big 12 each and every year, but especially this year concerning the circumstances with the Bears trying to carry the banner for the conference throughout the rest of the season. Sean, we appreciate it.
No problem, Mark.